Hello everyone, welcome to Tactica Imperialis and to today's video. Today is going to be episode 2 of an Aelfen Adventure Season 2, my Warhammer Age of Sigmar hobby project for the Daughters of Cain, primarily speaking anyway. Last time we introduced the paint scheme and the basing scheme for the army, as well as showing off a couple of units and having a bit of a tactical discussion as well. And I want to do a similar sort of thing today. So the focus of today's episode, as the title of the episode suggests, is Serpents and Sorcery. So we're going to be showing off some snaky units, and we're also going to be having a bit of a chat about magic. We're not going to do Morathi today. Morathi gets her own episode. I have now finished Morathi, but she gets her own episode. Believe me, we're taking our time with that one. But I do want to talk about magic in general, as that is now playing a much greater role with the Daughters of Cain. In fact, it's now playing a role full stop with the Daughters of Cain. And the Serpent units, the Melusai, are honestly some of my, well, I don't know if they're my favourite models in the range, but they are excellent models, and I do want to talk about them as well, because it's meant to discuss about unit variants, how you use them, where you use them, and so on and so forth. So we're going to have two segments. We're going to have a new unit show-off segment, as well as having a sort of old unit reduxed segment, same as we did last time. I won't spoil exactly what they are, but the title of the episode should give it pretty much away. Anyway, we'll get started with that, and if you have any thoughts about what I'm suggesting in terms of builds, what I'm doing with the paint schemes, and all of that, do let me know in the comments. Be very interested to see what you have to say, as always, because I do really value getting feedback and having discussions about things, because I know this game quite well. I'm no expert, but I know the game quite well, but I'm also learning and picking up a new army, and so I always enjoy having those discussions. So feel free to chip in, let me know what you think in the comments, because, you know, it's just more fun that way. But anyway, we'll start off with the brand new unit, I think, and we'll talk about their paint scheme and their applications on the tabletop, and then we'll get into our tactical magic segment. So without further ado, let's get started. This is episode 2 for an Aelfen Adventure, Season 2. Let's go.
Right, unit number 1 for today is a unit of 5 Blood Sisters, the Melusai melee variant, armed with their Heart Shard glaives, as well as the Crystal Touch, which is a special extra rule that they get. So you might have noticed that these guys obviously have a very distinctive look compared to the Witch Elf that we looked at in the previous episode, mainly because they're half snake. I actually painted these models first. I think these are actually the first models I painted in Season 2. And so you can sort of see the initial tests with the hair and the flesh here. I think the first model was you, I think. Yeah, I think it was you. So let's actually get, let's use the one at the front here. Let's use the Gore guy, I think they're called. So the flesh is the same as the Witch Elves you saw in the previous part with the Pallid Witch flesh, Reichland flesh shade highlighted back up. We've got a lot more gold this time, which I've actually painted, as I said in the previous part, the same way as my Stormcast Eternals, which is Retributor Armor, Carroburg Crimson, and either Sigmarite or Auric Armor, though I've mainly been using Auric Armor. There's a little bit of extra silver, which is just basically Lead Belcher, Null, or Ironbreaker, nothing really that ridiculous. However, the silver of the glaives, I have done a little bit extra to. So instead of washing them with Nuln Oil, and I'm not sure how well this is showing up on the camera, I've actually washed them with Coelia Green Shade, which, as I said, has become my new best friend. Because I wanted to give the idea that these are poisoned in some way, or that they are the mechanism by which the enemies are turned to crystal. I don't think it's exactly how it works in the terms of the lore, that it's with the weapon as opposed to with their hand. I'm not sure, but I saw the paint scheme in the Battle Tome where they'd done something similar, and I thought, yeah, that's really cool, I'm going to do that. So that's what I did. The hair is, as before, nice and simple, white, green shade, white, brighter white, nice and simple, though some of these, the white extra tone is a little bit overkill. I was still learning the ropes when I did it. Now, obviously, the most interesting part of these models is the serpent section. So I'm just going to turn you backwards. So I decided to go for quite a dark snake set because I didn't want it to detract from the upper areas of the model. This is also true with Morathi, and you'll also see when I do Kinnerai that I needed the focus to be not too much on the snake segment. I wanted the brighter colours to be in this sort of area because that's where the eye should be naturally drawn, or at least to me. I don't want the eyes down here. I want them sort of up here because I think that's where more of the detail is. So what I did is I painted the scales, that's the word I'm looking for, the main scales of the tail with Dark Angel's green, or as it's now called, Caliban green. And then I dry brushed it with a paint that I so rarely used during a town called Malice, but I actually really, really like. Where is it? Is it you? Yes, it's you. Sorry. Hellion Green. Lovely little paint, Hellion Green. I got it as an alternate mechanism to paint my blooming Griff Chargers, and as it turns out, it's really, really good as just building up layers. It's not the best surface for dry brushing, because although the tail is sculpted, these scales themselves are not very raised, or the grooves between them are not very deep, so getting an actual dry brush effect is a little bit more difficult. It's not like individually sculpted scales as it is with the red segments, but it's much more like there's a flat surface with some grooves in it. You still get a decent effect, but it's not perhaps the most standout. And then after I'd done that, I grabbed my new best friend, Coelia Green Shade, and I washed that down. I then moved on to the, what's the word? The fleshy bit, the underbelly, I guess. I don't know my biology well enough to know what that segment's called, this bit in the middle. And what I wanted to do with that was to make it a brighter tone that contrasted with the green, but was still darker than the flesh without going too overboard and creating an absolutely horrific clash of colours. So what I settled on was a grey, well, sort of grey. It's a bit bluish, but that's mainly because of the paints involved. They call themselves grey. They're not grey. So as a base coat, no, that's the highlight. Where is it? There it is. So as a base coat, I actually painted it the same way I paint my Tau. So base coat of the Fang, washed with Nuln Oil, and highlighted with Rust Grey. Actually going to move the light down a little bit so you get a better look at that. There you go. So the Fang is supposedly, these are like Space Wolf colours, but they actually work really well as Tau flesh, but I thought I'd repurpose them here and use them on my Melisai. And it's actually a really, really nice contrast, and if you're careful with the highlighting, you can really pick out the recesses. Sometimes I did it well, like on the Gore guy. Sometimes I wasn't so good at it. But I think that was a nice little set of colour contrasts, and then the scales, just running along the back of the tail. I thought I'd do this in a separate colour to everything else to make them stand out, so I did them in the same red as the armour. So that's the paint scheme. It's not exactly revolutionarily amazing, but it's an interesting variant because it takes a few different things from painting guides in the Battle Tome, as well as my own ideas about what colours should and shouldn't go together. There's also a little bit of purple cloth, and I am aware I did actually miss the shoulder pads on the 4 regular Melisai. I actually only remembered to do it on the Gore guy, so whoops. So that's the paint scheme, but there's also a question about assembly and how this kit goes together, because this kit is interesting. It's very hard for me to demonstrate because I don't have a spare one to show you, but the arms are not attached to a flat arm joint. So you might be familiar with many models that the torso is 1 or 2 segments that go together or don't, depending on how they're designed. And then the arms will be attached at the shoulder and be a straight, smooth join that pretty much cuts through the side of the shoulder blade, give or take. And that's roughly how it works. Sorry, I'm full of cold, and I really apologise for that. But with the Melisai, and it's actually also true with the winged stuff in the Daughters of Cain, the arms are actually sculpted into the back, or they're glued to go into the back. So, these models are awful for showing it. I don't know how well you'll see this on the camera, but you might just be able to see a little bit of a join line where the arm has gone into the back. Let me get my other hand in here. Move. So you can see it's sort of here-ish. This little segment here, that's the arm join. It's not a flat join. I'll use a paintbrush because that's a bit smaller than my finger. So the normal arm join is somewhere along here. It's a flat join. But here you can see the sort of sculpted effect. And there's a section carved out of the back to allow that to happen. And it's true on both sides. You can't see it on this side because of the hair, but it is actually there. Oh, no, you can see it. There's the second sculpt join there. I'm not very good at keeping them super clean, but that's how these things go together. And that's interesting because it allows for a much cleaner join. I'm going to bring the gold guy back to the front. It's better painted. It allows for a much cleaner join and allows it to go together a lot more solidly. It's a very, very solid connection if you get it right. However, with these models in particular, the arms have to be attached together first. So as you have the arm holding the weapon correctly, or at least that's how I do it for the sake of sub-assembly. So I would paint these models where I would have the weapon and the arms as one sub-assembly, the main torso as a one sub-assembly, and the head and hair as another sub-assembly. So if you want to get everything right, then you have to get this connection between the left hand and the left arm absolutely spot on. Now, the kit does help you with this. They're not just flat joints, go with it. There is a little bit of sculpt in there to help you out with that. But it is interesting. And the one downside it's got, and this is something that I think actually does bug me, is that it makes it very difficult to magnetize or alternate the variant of the model that you're building. Because if you want to get the head on, and change the arms out, you can't really do it because, as you can see, the arm joints are so far back set. You can get some of them out, but you can't get all of them out. Like this one here, the hair's right up to the arms. You'd never get the other set of arms in if you wanted to build the other variants at the same time. Now, you could do head swaps as well, but I don't think there's enough pieces to allow you to do it, and the heads don't sit on all that flat without glue. Blue tack or magnets or whatever are not the best for these models. So they're a little bit annoying if you're a fan of sub-assemblies, but they're not too bad as long as you're happy with having one variant that is glued together. I'm probably sure you can magnetize them, but I think you need a more skilled hand than me. Now, as to the variant I built, now we get a little bit of tactics. So the Blood Sisters are the melee variant, but there's also a ranged variant, the Blood Stalkers. They come with bows, they have daggers, and they also have some mortal wounds. So, statistics. Both units are move 8 with 2 wounds, a 5 up save, and a bravery of 8. They come in units of 5 or more, and both of them get +1 to hit on their unit champions. For the Blood Sisters, you get 3 attacks with a range of 2 that are 3s, 1 rend, and damage 1. And each model then also gets an additional single attack with 1 inch reach that hits on 4s, and if it hits, you do a mortal wound. Of course, add 1 to the hit rolls for the unit champion, so that will be hitting on 2s, hitting on 3s, but generally it's 3s and 4s. As for the Stalkers, they get a single attack with their bow, which is 3s, rend 1, damage 1 with 24 inch range, so they're basically Stormcast Judicators. And then in melee, they get 2 3s, 4s, no rend damage 1 attacks, and the unit champion gets an additional 3s attack with her little baby blood dragon thing. And if the Bloodstalkers roll a 6 to hit in the shooting phase with their bows, then you do a mortal wound instead. I think the Blood Sisters are slightly cheaper, but they can also be hoarded up, and they count as battle line if your general is a variant of Blood Rack Medusa. This means that you can actually have an entirely Melisai army as long as you're willing to not have a command ability, because the Slaughter Queen, Marathi, both of their command abilities that are unique to them are, if this model is your general, do something. So you give up unique command abilities, but you can have an entire army of stakes. It's cool. So why build Sisters over Stalkers? Because Daughters of Cain are a melee-focused army. Surely, adding in some relatively fast-moving shooting would be very, very useful. And I'd agree with that sentiment, but Blood Sisters are just better, to my mind. For a start, they're easier to get in big units because of the horde. They can get cheaper. And they're also battle lines, so you can build an army around them without having to rely on witch elves. You can't do that with Bloodstalkers, they don't have the reductions, and they don't have the battle line. But also, when you consider their damage output, then the Blood Sisters actually hit really, really hard compared to the Stalkers. And because of the 8-inch move and the rerolls that are given by the Daughters of Cain Allegiance ability, reroll 1s to run, then reroll 1s to charges, then reroll 1s to hit, it starts to become a case of Blood Sisters can actually out DPS Bloodstalkers even if the Bloodstalkers are shooting every single turn. Because 5 Bloodstalkers give you 5 attacks. That is probably going to give you 1 mortal wound a round, plus another 2 to 3 wounds depending on the armor of your opponent. Blood Sisters, on the other hand, can give you 15 rending attacks. So that's tripling the attack count of the Bloodstalkers at range, because it's the same weapon in terms of hit, wound, rend, damage, just one's in melee but has more attacks. And so if the Blood Sisters make melee, they get way more damage output. And on top of that, they get the mortal wounds in addition, not in place. So it's not a case of one of your 5 attacks will do a mortal wound, like it is with the Stalkers. With the Sisters, you get 15 attacks, and then the potential to do, on average, 2 or 3 mortal wounds, depending on how good your hit rolls are. And if you want a sentiment as how powerful that is, this unit, in a game I played recently, 1-shot killed a giant. Now, I'm not going to tell you that giants are the greatest units in the game, and I'm not going to tell you that my dice weren't amazing, because they were pretty good dice. But this little unit right here has the damage output potential to one-shot a mid-tier monster. Bloodstalkers just can't do that. And if you get Bloodstalkers into melee, then they basically turn into, well, Stormcast, with no armor. Because 2 attacks, 3s, 4s, that's Liberator stats. 1 ranged attack, 3s, 3s, that's Judicator stats. 2 wounds, Bravery 8, okay, similar to Stormcast, but then the 5+ save makes them a lot flimsier. So, I genuinely believe Blood Sisters are the much more powerful variant of the two. Now, that's not to say that Bloodstalkers don't have their place. They absolutely do. But I think if you're choosing your first box of Melisai, Blood Sisters are the more consistent variant to build. Shooting in Age of Sigmar is probably one of the weaker aspects of the game, unless your army is built around it. I'm not saying shooting isn't powerful, but armies that are not geared to shooting don't shoot very well. It's not like 40k, where most armies have decent ranged output and some decent melee output. There are very few armies in 40k, unless they're like Tau, that can't do a little bit of both to some successful degree. Daughters are much more about melee, and so their range suffers. They have good magic, and we'll get onto magic in the second segment, but their range attacks do suffer. In some extent, we'll get to that in a future episode, I think. So, I think I will be adding Bloodstalkers at some point in this series, but Blood Sisters were the more powerful variant for me in the first iteration. But feel free to disagree and let me know what you think in the comments. Anyway, I realised I've banged on for over 15 minutes about these little snakes, so let's move on and let's have a bit of a magic discussion as well as showing off a repainted model. Okay, unit number 2 is a repaint, as I mentioned already. It is my Blood Rack Medusa. The Blood Rack Medusa is a model that I have both loved and hated down the years. It's been a very consistent part of my army for a long time because the Blood Rack Shrine was utterly awful, and I actually quite liked it for what it did, but I never felt it was that stellar. And then the Battle Tome happened. So first off, let's quickly talk about paint scheme. You'll notice a lot of things in common with the Melisai that we just saw. The flesh is a lot more pallid than for the Melisai. That's probably mainly down to me being a bad painter. I have tried to sort of dull some of the details, but I kind of like the idea that she's been so warped by Marathi that her skin is just almost translucently pale and it's just hideous to behold. I don't mind that. It's not great painting, but I don't mind it. The main change is in the tail. Those who remember my old Medusa will know that it was a purple tail for the most part. I've now repainted it to be more in line with everything else. And I will say, building a Blood Rack Medusa is not a challenge. Repainting a already built Blood Rack Medusa is a flipping nightmare, because there's so many interlocking bits of tail that trying to get every bit in the right colour is a pain. It is a right old pain. But we managed as best we could, and here we are. You see the Whisper Claw, you've got the Bloodwrack Spear, as well as the Tail of Serpents, and I've repainted the snakes on her head to be more in line with everything else as well. Though did I do that with Morathi? I guess we'll find out together when I get to do Morathi in the future episode. So there's not much to say about the Medusa Return as a paint scheme because I've talked about it at length with the Melisai. What I want to do in this segment is talk about tabletop and particularly about magic, because the Bloodwrack Medusa got a big old upgrade in the Battle Tome. It is now a wizard. So statistically, it's a 8-inch move, 6 wounds, 5 up, save, bravery 8, so it's a Melisai with 6 wounds. For its ranged attack, it has roll a d6 for each enemy model in a unit within 10 inches. On a 5+, you do a mortal wound. This is lethal against hordes, although it's not so powerful against single model units because you can only do 1 mortal wound to them. It has a lot of melee attacks, 4 attacks with its claw, 3s and 3s, no rend damage 1, d6 2-inch reach attacks with its tails, which is 4s and 4s, no rend damage 1, and then 2 2-inch range attacks with its spear, 3s and 3s, rend 1, damage d3. There is your main melee DPS. This is a wizard that actually has a ranged attack, a decent melee attack, because that Bloodwrack Spear, that would be most wizards' only attack. It'd just be a couple of pokey damage d3 attacks. That would be it. But no, this thing gets another d6 plus 4 plink attacks. It's really quite powerful. And anyone who thinks, oh, that's a wizard, that'll be right squishy. No. If you let this thing attack, it will ruin your day. However, you also have its magic. So it knows 1 spell that it can cast it per phase. It can unbind 1 as well. It knows Arcane Bolt, it knows Mystic Shield, and it knows a spell called the Enfeebling Foe, casting value 5. Pick a unit within 18 inches, and that unit's wound rolls are now -1. So it makes a unit a lot less likely to do high damage to you, as well as hopefully cancelling out some of the on a 6 do something effects, unless of course it says natural 6, because at that point, well, no amount of modifier is going to save you. However, the Bloodwrack Medusa actually has a second build variant, and one that I basically wrote off until the new Battle Tome. This is the Bloodwrack Shrine. So, for about 80 points, is it 80? I think it's 80. Bloodwrack Medusa is 140, Bloodwrack Shrine is 220. Yes, so 80 points. 80 points. You get all of this. 7 more wounds. Another 6 plink attacks with your Shrine Keeper's Goad staves. You also get a impact hit attack, so if you complete a charge move, then on a 2+, you do d3 mortal wounds to the nearest enemy unit. Ow. You keep your shooting attack, you keep your magic, but you do lose a little bit of movement, and you also get the Aura of Agony. So this is an aura effect with 7 inches on it. So for every enemy unit within 7 inches of any Bloodwrack Shrine at the start of your hero phase, roll a d6. This originally is a 2+, although it does fall off, and it does d3 mortal wounds if you can make that roll. So this is a good way of dealing with those pesky heroes that are just knocking about, being very hard to kill because, oh, look at me, you've got lots of -1 to hit modifiers, and I've got some fancy armor, and oh, did I mention my shield gives me reroll? No. You are not hiding from my d3 mortal wound aura. Have fun, sucker. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, the Bloodwrack is one of the best hero snipers in some ways, but she's also one of the worst. Because between Bladed Impact and the Aura of Agony, she can easily chuck out on the Shrine d6 mortal wounds plus another one for a shooting attack before you've even got started. And then when she gets into melee, well, I've already given you her stats. She hits flipping hard. But she's also good at dealing with hordes because, of course, Aura of Agony, that's still d3 mortal wounds to a unit, might cause a battle shock test. Then, of course, you've got the Bloodwrack Stare, which is another number of models within 10 inches divided by 3 mortal wounds. So that's a 40-man unit. That's 16, no, 13, dead. I can do maths. So before you even started, you could easily be killing nearly half a unit in mortal wounds alone with this Bloodrack Shrine. It's really, really good. And it's 80 points. 80 points for everything I just listed. It's nuts. I mean, that's 80 points on top of the Medusa. So you gain the extra attacks, you gain the aura, you gain the extra wounds, you just lose a little bit of movement. Yeah, ow. Ow, 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 ow. The one downside that I do see to the Bloodrack Shrine, though, and this is potentially quite a big one, is taking it often means you don't take a Cauldron of Blood. Because the Bloodrack Shrine and Cauldron of Blood are built from the same kit. And so, unless you have built 2 separate kits to be Shrine and Cauldron, you're going to have to give up one of the 2 in order to run the other. This means that you won't get the power of Blood Shield, a massively powerful ability that I think I'll need to devote some time to in a future episode. And you've also got the lack of the Avatar's attack, so your big mount does far less damage. You've also got to give up the Bravery booster that it gives out. It's not fun to give up a Cauldron of Blood just to take a Bloodrack Shrine, but in a low point game where you might not be able to sneak a Cauldron in, this thing's like 100 points cheaper than 1 or 2 of the Cauldrons, so you might just be able to pull it off. Though I will say, it's up to you if you think the Bloodrack Shrine's worth it. Personally, I think it's a fantastic investment if you have a second kit. If you do have a second kit, absolutely worth it. If you don't, I don't know. The Medusa's plenty fine on her own on foot, running around, getting cover, being very, very annoying, hiding, because she's only got 6 wounds. She's annoying to deal with. But when she gets put onto the shrine, she becomes a behemoth, though she does not get the monster keyword for some stupid reason. Yeah, there are some downsides, but I think she's fine on her own. If you've got the spare kit, though, give the shrine a look. The Medusa and all the other wizards of the Daughters also get access to the Law of Shadows. Not the one from Malign Sorcery, that's later. This is a separate one. And what this does is gives you some really powerful abilities. You get one of these on top of what you know. You don't get to swap spells in and out from this. You know one spell from it. Unless you take a relic. And you don't get any additional casting out of it either. You still only get 1 spell per turn. The first spell is Steed of Shadows. Casting value 5, the caster now has a move of 16 inches and can fly. If you need to get a Bloodrack Shrine or a Bloodrack Medusa out of trouble or into a really nice setup position, this is the spell for you. Pit of Shades, casting value 7, enemy unit within 18 inches and visible. Roll 2d6, add the result. If it's greater than the move value of the enemy unit, do the number of mortal wounds equal to the difference. So, roll 2d6, get an 8, target a move 4 unit, you do 4 mortal wounds. This is not the most ridiculous ability in the game, but it is a very solid upgrade on doing D3 mortal wounds. You're probably on average going to get 2 to 4 mortal wounds out of it, unless you really, really high or low roll. I think you'll probably average 2 to 4 mortal wounds out of that spell. Symmetric Dance, Teleportation. Casting value of 4, choose 2 Daughters of Cain heroes within 24 inches of the caster. If neither of these 2 heroes is within 6 inches of any other unit, then they can change position without finding themselves within 3 inches of any enemy unit by doing so. So, you've got a Hag Queen that you need to get out of trouble, and you've got Morathi sat in the back lines who's just gone nuts because she took a plink in the last turn. Okay, that's fine, we'll swap their positions as long as nobody ends up within 3 inches and they're all 6 inches away, then that's all fine. This spell requires a little bit of setup, particularly if you're running with units like with Witch Brew and that lot, or trying to stop them being shot, but it has got powerful effects, and does actually work on the bigger units. So a shrine can swap places with a cauldron if you need their auras in different places. It's pretty powerful like that. Then you have the Withering, casting value 7, enemy unit within 18 inches. You add 1 to your wound rolls when targeting this unit. This is basically the equivalent to the Enfeebling Foe, but in reverse. So the Enfeebling Foe makes their wound rolls worse, and the Withering makes your wound rolls against them better. I think the Withering is the more powerful spell, absolutely, because it allows your entire army to benefit against attacking a big horde, but the Enfeebling Foe is still a powerful and useful spell against the right target. Mind Razor. Oh, Mind Razor. I love this spell. Casting value 7, pick a friendly Daughters of Cain unit within 18 inches. Until your next hero phase, the rend of the melee weapons of this unit is improved by 1. So rend nothing becomes -1, -1 becomes -2, and so on. And on top of that, the damage is improved by 1 when they attack a unit which has less bravery than their own unit. Given that there are many easy ways to get units in the game up to bravery 9 for Daughters, for example, there is a command trait that gives out bravery benefits. The Cauldron of Blood, I believe, gives out a bravery benefit, or maybe that's just avatars in general. You can really easily get a unit of Witch Elves at rend 1, damage 2, with 4 attacks each. Do I need to explain how insane that is? No, I don't think I do. But you can even cast this on, let's say, the Medusa herself, and suddenly you have 4 attacks, 3s, rend 1, potentially damage 2. Excuse me. Then you have d6 attacks, 4s, rend 1, damage 2. And 2 attacks, 3s, rend 2, damage d3 plus 1. That is not a wizard attacking you. That is an actual monster attacking you. Like, I think there's a lot of monsters in this game that would bite your arm off for that stat line. Seriously, they'd bite your arm off for that stat line, and you can get that by casting 1 spell against the right target. Units like Death that are bravery 10, okay, you're not going to get anywhere, but against the right target, this hurts. And then finally, we have Shroud of Despair. I think that's what it's called anyway. I've got the French version of the battle tome in front of me. Casting value 4, an enemy visible unit within 18 inches. Until the start of your next hero phase, subtract 1 from the bravery of that unit. If the spell is cast with a casting roll of 8 or more, subtract d3 instead. This stacks really well with Mind Razor, but it's also just really, really good, because Daughters of Cain do a lot of DPS. They can easily kill a lot of models in a single round, and thus force really nasty battle shock tests on people. So adding another -1 to their bravery, or potentially minus d3, well, that's another potentially 1 to d3 models running away, at a minimum. And that's not even getting into the fact that it combos really well with Mind Razor to eventually get the damage 2 off, and thus not only making 1 more model run away, but then doubling the damage count, potentially doubling the number of models that are able to run. Wow. I always underrated that spell, but it has some real nasty combinations if you can make it work. I think it requires a little bit of synergy, a little bit of setup. I wouldn't run it alone, I'd run it with another wizard with Mind Razor lurking around, but it is a very useful spell nonetheless. And that is the look at the Lore of Shadows. As you can see by what I've been reading through, they are some pretty powerful abilities. Personally, I'm a huge fan of Mind Razor, but I think that the Withering, Seed of Shadows, Pit of Shades, Shroud of Despair, they all have their place. I think Symmetric Dance is the hardest to set up, but it is one of the nastiest if you can make it work. And that brings us to the end of this episode of An Aelfen Adventure Season 2. I do apologise for the fact that I've been a bit full of cold this episode and been coughing and all of that stuff. And if my voice has been off, then I'm sorry. I'm hoping to have that cleared up not too far off into the future. But I do hope you enjoyed this episode nonetheless. Let me know what you think of the models and the tactics in the comments below. Always interested to see what you have to say. Next time, well, what do I want to show off? I'll have a think about it and I'll get back to you. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks and we will discuss the next edition. So, thank you very much for watching Tactica Imperialis. This has been episode 2 of Season 2 of An Aelfen Adventure. Hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching and goodbye.